On behalf of the OUCAP, I welcome you all. Good afternoon, you, ma'am, Professor Anipothan, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Dr. Nageshwar.
As part of the OUCAP lecture series, we have done 6 lectures successfully, and this is the 7th lecture titled Gender and Culture. Professor Anipothan, ma'am, is going to deliver the lecture on gender and culture. Most of the participants are the teachers at various levels, from school to college level, school, college, and some of them are from universities also, and some of them are still pursuing their PhDs. As the researchers of English language and literature, and from different disciplines, arts and social sciences, we always come across these two words, gender and culture. Yes, whether the gender and culture are two separate terms or they are interrelated, how the influence of these both words, both the concepts will be discussed by our today's lecture. We all know the word gender. Certainly it should be differentiated from sex. While sex refers to the physicality, whereas gender is more a social construct. So that to talk on this topic, the OUCAP has invited Professor Anipothan ma'am, retired Professor of English, Osmania University. Professor Anipothan ma'am was head Department of English, PG College, Secunderabad, and she has many achievements to her credit. Ma'am was an academic topper. She received gold medals in MA, and also she received gold medal in PhD program. She has produced 25 MPhils, 10 PhDs. Still, many scholars are working under her supervision. She has been a public speaker on a variety of topics, and Madam delivered almost 100 lectures. She has been an invited speaker to the academic staff colleges and UGC HRDC Usman University, Madichanna Reddy Institute, Human Research Center, and she gave series of lectures including NIT Warangal and also different parts of the country. And Madam was awarded a certificate excellence by the University of Arizona, United States of America, for poetry in English. And she published 2 volumes of poetry available on Amazon, and published a number of research articles. And many of her students, PhD students, are working at our university, Usman University, and working as the degree college lecturers and degree college teachers, and number of her students are working as school assistant teachers, junior lecturers in both Telugu states. And Madam was felicitated by many organizations, governmental and non-governmental organizations, that includes Press Club and Men's Club. And especially talking about ma'am, she is something different from other resource persons. She can talk on language topics. She can talk on the literature topics in a beautiful way. She has given wonderful lectures on Things Falls Apart, which are available on YouTube, part of the UGC program. And ma'am has specialized in soft skills, and she did 2 UGC projects. So that, and today we have ma'am's lecture. Thank you very much, ma'am, for accepting my invitation to deliver a talk on gender and culture. I welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nageshwar. I think you have complimented me excessively. You know, I wonder how much of it I really merit. A topic which I think many of you are aware of, see, that is called gender and culture. All right, all right. Um, to begin with, I would like to go back to the first book of the Holy Bible called the Genesis. Hmm? And I would like to focus your attention to the creation of Adam and Eve. God created the world and he rested. God created Adam and he rested. Later, God created Eve. All right. And since then, neither God nor Adam rest, rested. They didn't take a rest after that. This is only a joke. This is only a joke. But I am trying to tell you that gender, you know, the male and the female, and now we also have the transgender. See, so we have three genders. These genders, these sexes, existed from many centuries. There's nothing new about that. So why is the topic of gender now coming up quite frequently for discussion? That's a valid point. So let me tell you that gender, when it is connected to culture, you know, when you say gender and culture, gender we all know, okay. Gender is not like a sex, it's not male, female, transgender, no. Gender implies a social construct. I'll explain this to you. The roles that a man, a woman have to play out in society for harmonious living. In order to make life balanced, you know, roles were assigned. Roles were assigned. You know, the woman should do this. The man should do these. All right. So that is what we call gender. Now we must understand the history of gender roles. What is the history of gender roles? I'll tell you. A very important factor that comes into focus is what we call the role of patriarchy. The role of patriarchy. You must understand, I'll call you friends. You must understand, friends, that worldwide patriarchy was an inevitable factor of human life. You know, the elders, the fathers, the older brothers, the uncles, the priests, see, elders of all religious institutions, they got together and they defined how life should be lived by a man, how life should be lived by a woman. Now, there is nothing wrong in this. There is nothing wrong because it is meant for daily harmonious living. But you know, when you look at patriarchy closely, you will find that it was also a kind of an effort. It was a kind of an effort to keep the balance of power carefully. You know, I'm not talking about domination. No. I'm not talking about, you know, that very obvious control. No. I'm talking about the fact that somehow, I mean, if you look at the field of politics or you look at religion or you look at any field, you will find that there is patriarchy on one side, and this patriarchy took charge of what we call interpretation. Interpretation, you know, that's very important. So the interpretation of everything was done in such a way that the female population was kept at a slightly lower level. I will talk to you about this higher lower aspect also. I mean, it's not right to call it higher lower, but I'll explain to you how, due to the evolution of societies, and due to, societies have always evolved. You ask me how. All right. Taking you back to around 2000 years ago, 2000 years in the past, we had what is called agrarian societies, agriculture based. And when it was agriculture based, I mean the roles were very, very clearly specified. You had the woman of the house, the wife, the mother, the sister, carrying out the domestic chores, seeing that the family life was very harmonious. I mean, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And they used to do that. And you had the men going outside and working, see? I mean, bringing in the money, the sustenance for the family. So I believe that that was a very fair distribution of work. The man is the breadwinner, and the woman takes care of the house. And of course, the family, the children, see? Very, very important concept. Now, did society stop at the agrarian stage? No, it progressed. We went on to industrial, then we went on to urbanized, we went on to, you know, globalized. Today we live in a globalized world. And because we live in a globalized world, there is a lot of pressure, not only on the man, but sometimes on the woman also, to become an earning member, to substitute the income of the family. Now, here the problem starts. When the division of roles have been disturbed, the division of roles have been disturbed. I mean, I personally believe that we were slightly violating the laws of nature, natural laws. See, natural laws were like that. But then we progressed. I don't know whether we really progressed, but at least that is called progress. See, and then the woman also used to go out and work, and there the problem starts. There the problem starts. I mean, a woman might think, I also go out and earn, then why am I doing everything in the house? She might ask that very logical question. She might ask that very logical question. So that is why today we take into consideration also the culture of that situation. See, now, now the next logical question is, what do we mean by culture? What is culture? Sometimes you see people having an argument. Oh, you have no culture. What do they mean? See, culture is not a word to be used loosely. I'll tell you what culture actually means. It's a very loaded word. It's a loaded term. Culture actually means, number one, the history of that people, the race of people, the history. Their history, their background, the religions they follow, the languages they speak, their food habits, the way they dress, all that is part of culture. But for the purpose of this lecture, I am not going to go into those areas, The history, all right, we all know Indian history, see, we all know that. I'm not going to go into religions because that will become very complicated. So, for the purpose of this topic, I am limiting myself to three aspects of culture. These are also very important aspects. The first aspect is your attitude. How do we see things? That's very important. That's also part of culture. That's what I'm saying. People use culture very loosely, Culture doesn't mean only refinement, like you're not cultured, you're uncultured. See, culture refers to, very importantly, the 3 points: your attitude, your behavior, and the way you speak. Friends, the way we speak, our language is very, very important. Because when you speak, when we speak, what do? We reveal our personality, we reveal our character. That is why we are often told, be very careful the way you speak. And especially as teachers of English, we are extra careful about the way we speak. So this afternoon, I will try to show you how gender can be influenced by the attitude of people, the behavior of people, and the way they speak to women. That's important. Now, if you ask me, ma'am, what is your personal view about gender? I will tell you at the very outset, I don't believe in this gender war at all. I don't believe in that. I believe men and women are so complementary to each other. They are so complementary. What a man cannot do, a woman can do. What a woman cannot do, a man can do so well. So for me, it's like a give and take thing. I don't believe in this gender conflict at all because I think that we are misguided. Like we are misguided. I believe in the homogeneous, harmonious living of men and women. And now, as I told you, we have also the transgender race. All should live in harmony. But since we are looking at the influence of culture on gender, let me tell you that as late as 1875, approximately, see, you had an English writer in England, and her name was Virginia Woolf. I'm sure many of you have heard of Virginia Woolf. Like, she was very path breaking. And she, discussed, she wanted the answer to a very simple question. I mean, she was asking herself that question. And she asked herself this question: why are there so few women writers compared to men writers in English? I mean, it's a very, very fundamental kind of question. Why are there such few women writers compared to men writers? Now, she writes a poetic article, called A Room of One's Own. I'm sure many of you know that, A Room of One's Own. And Virginia Woolf, let me talk to you a little bit about her personal life, then you will understand. Virginia Woolf lived in Kensington, England, and she was writing at a time when in England, girls were not allowed to go for higher education. I mean, they could study up to school, that's it. But if they wanted to go for college, they would say, no, no, you're not male. No, you are a woman. See, they would look at the sex, the male-female part. So, this girl was very, very intelligent. I mean, you couldn't put her down because she's a woman and therefore she can't go for higher studies. So, what did this Virginia Woolf do? She started reading from the vast library of her father in the house. She used to read almost every book there. And her father was shocked, and he told her once, goodness gracious, how you gobble books. How you gobble books. I mean, this girl had an immense capacity to read and write. And therefore, she wrote this Room of One's Own, not knowing that this was going to be the first feminist treatise in English. She didn't realize that, but she wrote that. A Room of One's Own. Now, in this, she talks about many things. Of course, she goes back to that same old story of woman, being taking care of the house, a woman giving birth to children, nurturing. She talks about all that. But she pinpoints two reasons as being the cause. Number one, she says for a woman to start writing, she must have a room of her own. Number one. Number two, she should have at least 500 pounds a year income. That's her personal income. Okay, that's not the family income. It's not the husband's income. So only if she has these two, she will be able to write. So when Virginia Woolf wrote this, people began to understand that if a woman has creative talents, number one, she should have privacy. Number two, she should be rich. Because if you're poor, it's a problem, see? So that was one. Now you have a feminist critic, and her name is Elaine Showalter. Elaine Showalter. She talks about feminist criticism. She talks about feminist criticism, and she discusses a point where it was believed that a man is more intelligent than a woman because the frontal lobes of his brain is bigger. The frontal lobes of a man's brain is bigger, a woman's is smaller. So they said, even, you see physiological reasons, a woman is not so intelligent. I am not a feminist. I don't believe in feminist ideology. But then there are certain facts that all of us should recognize. So today, when I see blatant exploitation of women, yes, there is some part of me that is furious. I say, how can this happen? All right. So I have mentioned Elaine Showalter. I will not go into details because it's a little complex, not necessary for my lecture. So now what am I going to do? I am going to draw your attention to men and women. Men and women. I don't want to study half and leave out the other half, friends. When I talk about gender and culture, I'm also drawing in men. It's not just about women and the same old story. No, no, no. So I'm including men, all right? Men, women, and I said the transgender, and I'm going to look at the whole scenario objectively. How? Number one, I'm going to view men and women in the family context. And I am going to examine how culture can make either some difference or no difference at all. Okay, so please be with me when I examine this. You have a husband and a wife. All right. You have one or two kids in the family. All right. Yes. And then let us look at the attitude of the husband to the wife and the wife to the husband. This is not a one-sided thing. I'll explain the paradox to you. I'll explain the paradox. Today, you have so many women's rights movements, feminists, all that you have. But I am aware at the same time that there is a small minority of men who are also up against women domination, undue domination, ill treatment at the hands of women. But as I believe, I think that is more of a minority, whereas the woman's story is more of a majority. Now, in the family context, suppose a woman is, after her work, she's gone out and worked and she comes back and the husband is, just relaxing and reading some magazine and the children are taking, time to talk to the mother or to ask her, make demands. If the husband can be a passive spectator, or if he thinks that the wife will do everything and there is no need for him to bother, I don't think the attitude is right. I think the husband needs to be a little more educated because, he should not look at his wife as being compelled to carry out the gender role. He should be more sensitive. Similarly, the wife, she should also be more sensitive to the husband, to whatever, what does he require, his requirements. She cannot tell him, no, I can't do this. No, that's what I'm saying. It's a personal thing. It's mutual between the husband and wife. But I feel so shocked when I hear that in the name of domestic chores, there is so much violence, especially today. Especially today. I don't know how the pandemic has affected all of us. I mean, some of us have not been taking it too well. Some of us have been able to, overlook all that and use it in a positive way. Some of us are doing that. I hope so. Yeah. Yes. So, but now when I read that the divorce rate is going up a little higher now, because the husband and the wife are not able to tolerate each other 24/7. That's what I read. I believe the courts are full of petitions for the divorce. Sometimes my own friends and scholars talk to me about this. They talk to me about this, and I tell them, don't make any decisions in these pandemic lockdown times. Don't do that, because this is not the actual reality. This is just a certain phase. So that's what I'm saying. Behavior of the man to the woman and the woman to the man is very, very crucial. Sometimes it may not be even the what you talk. It might be your nonverbal communication. Your nonverbal communication, which can be very powerful. Can you hear me, Nageshwar? Can
Yes,
you hear?
ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
fine.
ma'am.
Yeah, fine, fine. I'll continue. So that's what I'm saying. I believe, family life is so crucial. Family life defines the quality, the mood outside, in the outside world. For example, if a man or a woman do not have a congenial family life, I mean, I'm including the kids also, it is bound to show. It is bound to show. So I think family is a structure. Family is a structure where attitude, behavior, the way you speak, your nonverbal communication becomes very crucial in the healthy relationship between man and woman. Now, why am I constantly telling you man and woman, Because I believe that this gender, the sexist thing should be viewed as a whole. You can't study it piecemeal. I mean, I can't cut the topic into two and say, today I will talk only about women. No, no. I'm talking about society. I'm talking about men and women. And I'm trying to show how, if in our culture, man, woman included, if we can be attentive to these 3 points, your attitude, your behavior, the way you speak, and your nonverbal communication, then I think half this gender problem is solved, because the family is the crux, the family is the base. All right. Now let us step outside the family, outside the house. And you come into contact with the big world outside, see? Now, that world may be in the field of education, it might be in the medical sphere, it might be in the political realm, it can be in the business field, see? Now, when you look at these 4 spheres, I've taken 4 spheres, okay? I've taken education, I've taken the medical field, I've taken the political arena, and the business field. The business field. What do we find? Okay. Now let us look at the very simple people. Very simple people who work for a living. We call them labor, labor class. A man and a woman work for 8 hours, right? Yes. Are they paid equal wages? No. Why? I mean, the woman is doing whatever she is capable of doing, and the man is doing whatever he is capable of doing. But I know how these people work. A man will go out 10 times for tea, or he will go out and smoke. The poor woman doesn't do that. Maybe she'll have one something, and then she'll carry on her work. But when it comes for the time for payment, that poor woman, she has worked so much. She has probably worked in a house also, and she comes and toils here also, but she's given something smaller. All right, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. I have told you about labor of the hands. Huh? Okay, let me talk to you about intellectual work and physical work. Intellectual work and physical work. You are all doing intellectual work, right? Yeah. So you get a higher compensation don't you? Compared to the man who works with his hands? Yeah? Why? Are you aware of John Ruskin, the great British writer, John Ruskin? He has written an essay called Work and Play. Work and Play. And he says that your scientist sitting in an AC room classifying butterflies does not really know the meaning of work. I mean, he is doing work, obviously. What is he doing? Sitting in an AC room and classifying butterflies. Look at the man working outside in the hot sun with sometimes not even a shirt to cover his back. But in terms of wages, it is so uneven. Now, my question to you is this. I'm going to ask you a double question. Why is a woman's labor always undervalued? Why is physical work undervalued? Let me give you some very interesting statistics here. 'More than 95% of the world's property is owned by men. More than 95% of the world's property is owned by men. That means what? That means the women collectively in this world are poor. They are poor. They own, I mean, the ratio-wise, they are half the number, no? The population is 7 billion plus. Today, the world's population is 7 plus billion. So you will have minimum 3.5 billion women. Together, they don't even own 5% of the world's property. That means they're very, very poor. And this poor population are being put down more. They are being further pushed. You know, sometimes we know today, I don't need to tell you the crimes against women in society. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there because it's so scary. You know, I feel sometimes, am I living in the same world where this is happening? I'll tell you why. If some atrocity is committed on a woman anywhere in the world, I think it affects all women. It's not like that woman X, that lady Y. No. It affects womanhood worldwide. I hope you're getting my point. I remember I saw a very beautiful Malayalam movie, you know. That Malayalam movie was very good a number of years ago. And that film talks about how women, rich women, women of the middle class, women of the simple class, you know, they're all exploited in different ways. They're all exploited in different ways. See, for the poor woman, it will definitely be physical violence. We know that, see. For the middle class woman, it will be about abuse and, you know, insults. But for the rich woman, it will be very different. I'll tell you this little thing that I read. You know, there was a very big man in the defenses. You know, he worked in the defense. I think he was in the army. And he would take his wife out and they would go for parties. You know, they have an active social life. So they would go out for parties and he would pretend as if he loves her so much, you know, and he would call her darling and dearie and, you know, put his arm around her. And everybody would be impressed that this great man, you know, loves his wife. After the party, they would go back home. And it would be almost like late in the night. And then because he would be drunk, you know, they have a lot of drinks, I think, in these parties. So he would go back home and he would, you know, abuse her and speak all kinds of filth and, you know, have all his doubts about her conduct. But there was one condition, even as he was ill-treating her, he would tell her, scream quietly or the neighbors will hear. Scream quietly, you know, whatever insults he heaps on her, she is not supposed to make any noise. She's not supposed to make much noise. So he says, scream quietly or the neighbors will hear. That's what I'm telling you, you know. When you talk about crimes, when you talk about abuse, please understand that it can be at different levels. I know some wives who complain that their husbands use very sharp one liners. It won't be a long, angry kind of thing. No, no. It'll be very short, one line, but it'll be very hurtful. I mean, it can wound that poor woman for the rest of her life. That's the kind of utterance. So today I am trying to see how even women can be much more thoughtful in their treatment of men. I think it's necessary. Sometimes, for various reasons, a woman can get unnecessarily aggressive, and that I think is something to be avoided. So there you have now. I would like to now tell you. I don't know whether you've heard about the writer called Suniti Namjoshi. You've heard the name? All right. She writes a book called Feminist Fables. All right. She writes feminist fables. And in that fable, there is a story of a couple who have a daughter very late in their lives. And this girl grows up to be outstanding, not only in studies, but in all the extracurricular activities. I mean, she's good at everything. So some of the families get jealous and they tell, they, in the village, they have the panchayat, the panchayat. And they tell him, let us have a meeting because we want to discuss that girl. So they all sit around that tree, that huge banyan tree. They sit down there and they listen. And then that the leader of the panchayat has to make the final comment. And he says, of course, in this village, we are all proud about this girl. She's good in this, blah, 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 all he says. But then finally he says, but for a girl, she is too much. I mean, that's his verdict, huh? For a girl, she's too much, meaning a girl should not be that good. No, no, she shouldn't be much better than the boys. That's the problem. Remember Virginia Woolf, see? She couldn't study because she was a girl. I mean, they were trying to put her down because of her physicality. Let me ask you. Let me ask you. Does the mind have a gender? The body has a gender, yes. You're male or female, or you're transgender. Okay. Does the mind have a gender? Do emotions have gender? You have male happiness, female happiness. They're different. They're same. Then my question is, why are we placing so much emphasis on gender? I think in our state also, Telangana, Andhra, we are very gender conscious, terribly gender conscious. I think, and I'm talking to academicians, see, you're all in education. I am telling you, friends, that we have to reach a stage where we go beyond gender. We go beyond gender. I mean, when you're working, you can't all the time say, oh, I'm female, I have to do. No, 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 no. No. You have to transcend gender. You have to be just like your male counterpart. Yes? I remember when I was working, and we sometimes had to work closely. So we used to work as individuals, never as a male, female, never. Because the moment you think male, female, the problem starts. So you have to tell your learners, you have to tell those who are in close touch with you, that we have to think of ourselves as individuals. We are individuals doing the same job. I mean, what's wrong? Wonderful. Because I think only that way this gender problem will be solved worldwide. Otherwise, there's a huge conflict. Let us respect each other as as individuals. You're telling me something, Nageshwar?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Okay. How much time do I have left?
Another 10, 15 minutes. 15 minutes.
Wonderful, wonderful.
1-5.
Yes. I want to again focus your attention on Bharati Mukherjee. She's an Indian writer, though she prefers to be called American writer because she's writing from there. So her works of literature are anthologized under American writers, not under Indian writers. Bharati Mukherjee writes a short story, and that is called Management of Grief. Management of grief. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful narrative where she talks about two Indian women living in Canada, and both of them lose their husbands in the same plane crash, 1985. I think it was Kanishka, and both the women lost their husbands, and their names are Kusum and Shaila. Kusum and Shaila lose their husbands. Now they have a child each. Each of them has a child. Now time passes by, and Shaila realizes that it's very difficult for her to do the work of the husband and the wife in her house. I mean, she has to go out and work, and she says, "No, I think I'll take a practical decision," you know, and she decides to remarry. I mean, she doesn't actually marry. It's just a decision, a thought that comes to her mind. Kusum, the other girl, she says, "No, no, no. You see, I'm an Indian, and I'm bound by those Indian, traditions, and I think I should be faithful to the memory of my husband." So she says, "No, no. I will remain single. I will live like this as an ascetic, and I will take care of my child." Now, the story I have sometimes used as a case study. I have used it as a case study because we are trying to see who took a better decision, who took a wiser, practical decision. But then the thought that strikes me when I read this story is, why are we even discussing this? We are discussing this because they are women. Suppose, I distort the story and I say that the two women died in the and the two husbands were left like that, without their wives. Would we be even discussing remarriage? We wouldn't. We wouldn't. I hope you're able to see gender. Just because you belong to that gender, you are being constantly punished in a sense. You're being constantly restricted. But you don't have the typical like a woman's brain. I mean, what is a woman's brain? I don't know. You have that the brain which everybody has. You have the same emotion. So that is why I feel sometimes that even our narratives are a little lopsided. We take it for granted. I know many mothers, they have a girl child and a boy child. You know, uh, when a boy cries, they tell him, "Oh, don't cry, you're a man after all. See, you're a man. Man shouldn't cry." But the girl child, she can weep as much as she wants because the mother thinks, "Oh, after all, she's a girl, let her cry." After all, in her life, also, she may have to go on crying. That's what I'm saying. I will now quickly talk to you about this aspect called gender sensitization. You are familiar, right? Yes. I was called by some engineering colleges to talk to their first year boys and girls about gender sensitization. So I went. I went in the first time. I went. This topic was a little new to me also, but I said no, no, no problem. I'll try it out. Oh, when I went and met that class, it was a huge auditorium, and there were 90% boys and 10% girls. So I didn't know how to start the topic. So I just wished them and I said, "Okay, okay, guys, you tell me, uh, how do you treat your mothers?" I started from there. How do you treat your mothers? You know what the reaction was? More than 50% of the boys put their heads down because they were kind of stumped. They didn't think that, the mother uh, ought to be treated in such a way or thought about in such a way. Then when they never gave it a thought because they said they say, "Oh, mother is always there. The mother is there. She will do." See, please understand. Even that mother is bound in a role. There is a role. Sometimes she will do it instinctively. She will do it as a matter of choice. But sometimes there is a role inflicted. So that's what I'm saying. It's so important to find out. I mean, the girls were much more direct. They didn't have problem. And I asked, "How do you treat your mother?" They were okay with that. Are you able to get my point? So that's what I'm saying. Gender sensitization is what we should be looking at today. And now, quickly, in the remaining time, I want to talk about what could be the possible remedies for this particular topic. Like, see, I don't want to just give you a vague lecture. That's not going to help. So practically, what can we do? What can we do to see that there is some improvement, starting, of course, with our own family, and then taking it over to your classroom situation. Classroom situation. I'll tell you. I'll tell you. I saw once quite an attractive girl, walking down the road. And then opposite, there were a group of boys. There were a group of boys and they were looking at her and they commented to themselves, oh, she looks quite beautiful. Looks beautiful, they said, about that young girl. Then when she came a little closer, they looked at each other. They were a little disappointed. Maybe she didn't have the kind of face they wanted her to have. So they said, oh, but she is far from beautiful. When she came close, oh, she's far from beautiful. From far, she's beautiful. But when she comes close, she's far from beautiful. So my point is, when you are in the family context, whether in the context of the classroom, or maybe your community outside, I don't think that we should place much importance on the physicality of a girl, her appearance. No, I think that should be much reduced. How can you do that? How can you practically do that? By focusing on the other dimensions of a girl, by focusing on other dimensions. I mean, you can do this by way of telling them a good short story, by way of giving them a nice poem. These are ways and techniques of, making boys understand that a woman is much more than her appearance. I mean, I blame, of course, our films and our serials, that keep on emphasizing, a woman's appearance. A girl should be like that. I remember a student of mine once asked me, ma'am, why in all matrimonial ads they want a fair girl? Why does a boy want a fair girl? I said, because he's mad, I said. Because he's mad. He doesn't realize the other part, that a woman can be beautiful even without being fair. I mean, this is a worldwide thing, huh? I'm not saying only in India. No, no, it's worldwide. The girl has to be fair. Then she sadly told me, ma'am, I'm not very fair, so what are my chances? What are my chances? I said, don't worry. The right boy will come for you. And then he will marry you and you will be happy, I said. I mean, I'm only joking, huh? But I'm saying that this is a worldwide problem. Worldwide problem. I think these are the areas where we have to be very, very careful as educators. And we have to see that, girls are never teased, girls are never put down. I know in some colleges where boys outnumber the girls become very self-conscious. So we have to instill them with more confidence. We have to do that. Now, I want to tell you quickly how this concept of a powerful woman is sometimes not appreciated. And I don't want to get very personal, but the recent campaign irritated me so much. When in the state of Bengal, Mamata Banerjee was referred to as a Didi, oh Didi. Oh, I was very upset. Not so much by the language as much as by the tone. The tone to me suggests that, you woman, why are you dominating here? To me, that's what the tone says. It's not about just calling somebody sister or that's all right. That's all right. But the tone, like, then I was thinking to myself that day, in India, we have 29 states. We have one woman CM in Bengal. And then she is trying to be toppled by a whole lot of men, so many men. I mean, they have the machinery, they have the power to topple one single woman as a CM of this country. I mean, look at Parliament, you'll find. Let me tell you, friends, let me tell you. Women don't need politics for their survival. But I believe politics need women. Politics needs women, especially I believe now. There's so much to be done on what I call micromanagement. There's so much to be done on micromanagement. And I don't know why the women are kept out. The loss is not the women's. It's all right. Women know how to keep themselves occupied anyway, see? But the loss is the nation's. It is the loss of the nation. Then yeah, I think yesterday or day before I saw the newspaper, and they have appointed new VCs, to 10 universities. And I looked and looked at the list. There's not a single woman. Oh my gosh. Why this? Why? Because even in 2021, we still have the same old baggage. We have the same old problem. No, woman's place is primarily, she should be quiet, she shouldn't be too aggressive. We have that somewhere at the back of our mind. So I think this has to change. But let me tell you on a more positive note, when I compare the women of like my grandmothers, grandmothers, when I see that, I think, at least we are allowed to study, we are allowed to work, we can do that. But somehow I don't like the word allow. I mean, why should somebody allow you? Are you not born with that equality with men? Aren't all of us equal? You're not saying anything. All right. Let me now conclude by going back to that same Adam and Eve analogy and telling you that when God took the rib from Adam's side and fashioned a woman, he took the rib. That's interesting. Why? He did not take from the head because Eve was not going to be Adam's boss. No. He did not take from Adam's feet because Eve was not going to be his slave. So the rib suggests equality. The rib suggests that Adam and Eve would work together side by side. He would not dominate, he would not be submissive. But I believe that in the days to come, let us at our own level try to see that harmony exists between man and woman in our society. Thank you so much for listening to me. God bless you all.